We begin with the latest on efforts for a new truce and hostage release in the war in Gaza. But there is pushback from inside the Israeli government to a plan laid out by U.S. President Joe Biden on Friday. Two far-right ministers are threatening to resign and bring down the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he goes ahead with it. Journalist Iris Mackler is tracking developments from Jerusalem.
What we're seeing is two far-right parties, the most extreme right wing of a right-wing government, who are opposed to this. They want to fight on to the end, to the total defeat of Hamas. Some of the more messianic elements of these smaller parties also want Israeli settlers to move into Gaza. So they have a very different agenda, perhaps, from mainstream Israelis. But there are a large number of mainstream Israelis who also want to see Hamas defeated. And what they're hearing from their Prime Minister is that that is the aim. It's repeated every time. And I guess what Joe Biden was doing in his speech was speaking above the head of the politicians to the Israeli public. And what he was saying to them is, you're only going to hear, no matter what plan is put forward by Israel to its negotiators sent to Cairo or to Qatar, you, the Israeli public, don't hear the plans. And I'm going to tell you what they are. And that's what he laid out, a ceasefire plan and an option for the day after in Gaza. What was quite interesting is I was in a shop this morning and people really were shouting at each other about it. Some people saying this is an interference in Israeli politics, others saying it's a vital step that a friend of Israel's has taken to tell us, the people. And don't forget, of course, last night, 120,000 people protesting against this government, protesting in favour of a ceasefire after Joe Biden's announcement Friday. So you can see that this issue is very fraught and at the top of Israel's agenda.
Yeah, OK. So given all of those divisions then, Iris, what now? Where does Israel go from here?
The question everybody has been asking, especially the families of the hostages, for about, almost 8 months now. So what we know is that there's a war cabinet meeting tonight to look at Joe Biden, at the US president's proposals, to see what happens next. We know there's a team meant to go to Cairo to have discussions also about the Rafah border crossing, which Egypt says will not be reopened while Israel is in control of it. So lots of balls in the air. Will it make a difference? I'd tell you this. The main issue between the two sides is the issue that has been there all along. Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire. Israel does not want that. They say it would only give them a chance to regroup. And until that issue is resolved, a permanent ceasefire versus a staged ceasefire, there won't be an agreement.
Now, for more on the proposed ceasefire deal, I want to turn now to Alon Pinkas. He's a former Israeli foreign policy advisor, joining us now from Tel Aviv. Hello there, sir. Thank you for being on the program with me.
My pleasure, Chris. Hi.
So we just heard Iris there kind of lay the table about all of the pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu is under, especially given the fact that two Israeli ministers are threatening to quit and collapse the government if he agrees to this proposal for the ceasefire. So can you talk to me a little bit about what is he going to do, given that internal pressure from his own government?
Well, let's start with the fundamentals, Chris. This is an Israeli proposal. The President Biden, presented it as an Israeli proposal. A later briefing of the press by a quote-unquote senior U.S. official even went into further details and elaborated that it is a 4.5-page proposal. He went by and ran by the different phases of the proposal. So, yeah, the president delivered it. And, yeah, Israelis are talking about whether Biden should have or should have not utter and articulate this. But in the end, this is an Israeli proposal, unless the president of the United States of America just made it up, which doesn't make sense. So the question now is whether or not Mr. Netanyahu is going to absorb these Pavlovian responses from his lunatic fringe right-wing coalition partners. Those, by the way, that he appointed, he's backing and he's supporting. So let's not let him off the hook here. If he goes for this deal, it means inevitably not only a 6-week ceasefire, but that would lead almost invariably to a permanent ceasefire. And that is not something that he wants. So I think that in the next 48, 72 hours, He's going to dwell on conditions and stipulations and prerequisites, and let it just falter. I just do not see him giving up his coalition for this.
Well, and it is interesting to point out, too, that less than an hour after Biden released this proposal, he was out there saying the conditions have not changed. So it certainly speaks to what you were just talking there. But interestingly as well, the opposition party there in Israel had offered support to Netanyahu if he were to accept the deal and have kind of chaos in his own government. So why would they have made that offer, the opposition to Netanyahu?
Well, okay, so you're touching on a major issue, a major political issue in Israel, Chris, but let me divide it into two. Substantively and to the point of the hostage release, the opposition parties feel that they are responsible, that they should act accordingly, and if there is a hostage deal on the table, they need to support it. And so this reflects not a consensus, but a majority emotion, sentiment, and opinion in Israel about the need and the necessity to get this done. On a much broader scale, one of the most astounding, breathtaking things that happened politically in Israel in the last 8 months is the complete disappearance of the opposition. There is no opposition. It's a combination of inertness, ineptness, confusion, disorientation, call it what you want. They will sugarcoat it and say at a time of war, we need to act responsibly, we need to act in the best interest of national unity. Okay, let's speculate for a second that this debacle, this catastrophe of October 7th happens under a different prime minister, while the head of the opposition is Mr. Netanyahu. There wouldn't be a government at this point. He would not mince words, and he would not think twice before bringing down the government. And so that's, to many people in Israel, that's a political tragedy, but it is what it is.
Hit it on the head for us. Why is he so bent on staying in power, Netanyahu?
Oh, you're asking me to answer a question that goes deep into psycho-political analysis, and I don't know that I'm equipped. Look, on the face of it, he's facing he's in an ongoing trial, facing 3 indictments of alleged corruption, alleged bribery, alleged falsification of documents, and breach of trust. And so he knows that his situation in that trial could be affected negatively, adversely, if he's not in power. He thinks that being in power shields him. Number 2, he has developed we can go on and on for this, but we don't have time. He's developed a sort of Louis XIV syndrome. He believes that he is the embodiment of the state, and the state cannot survive without him. And so you combine those two, and you see why he's behaving the way he's behaving, why he's subjugating, actually, every national security interest to his own political interests of survival.
Well, he is certainly facing a lot of pressure from a lot of different sources, including the government of Canada, who just spoke and kind of urged him to accept this deal, saying that they welcome this deal, certainly. So it'll be interesting to see what Benjamin Netanyahu does next.
Just let me add one more sentence, Chris. Do you see the irony or the complete idiocy of all this? That the American president, the Canadian prime minister, the French president all need to convince Israel to accept its own proposal.
Right, yes. It is very fascinating to watch. Alon, thank you very much for joining us on the program and giving your insights here. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Alon Pinkas is a former Israeli foreign policy advisor speaking to us from Tel Aviv.